indeed for your contributions. And now we're going to move more sort of generally to talk in the last few minutes of this session about NHS England and other points you'd like to make. Yes, there's a gentleman at the back there holding up a piece of paper.
Thank you. My point to the board of the NHS is there's a lot of patient representatives, very hard-working patient representatives who sit on committees and boards throughout the NHS. And it's a very undemocratic organisation because these patient reps are invited or appointed. My point is what happens when the point of view of the patient representatives don't agree with the senior management or the executives, and the patient representatives are sidelined, or they face a conspiracy of silence or bullying, and they just don't get invited back. I think NHS Citizen is quite a good way of ploughing forward, but it's not grasping the important point that when patient representatives disagree with senior managers, they are totally disadvantaged.
Totally disadvantaged, Matthew Swindells.
Well, I think that that shouldn't be what happens, and it isn't what happens in the vast majority of places. The input of the people who give up their time in order to participate on boards and on committees, we bring them in because they are representing a community and they're representing a point of view, and it's an important part of that. And when we make changes, we then go out to a wider consultation, including through local authorities and including directly to the public. So if you have that experience, that is a bad experience, and I wouldn't defend it, but I don't think it is representative of the very close relationship that the vast majority of NHS organisations have with their local communities.
Thank you very much. And another question, yes, this gentleman here, and then the lady at the back.
Sorry, my name is Matt O'Neill. I'm the chair of Narcolepsy UK, which is a chronic neurological disorder, sleep disorder. My closest relationship with NHS England has been in the courtroom. So, that said, when will you stop spending money on trying to defend the indefensible, and when will you start treating people with the medicines that have been licensed in this country for over a decade, rather than fighting us having to fight for them for adults and children? It's not acceptable. Thank you.
Well, I don't know whether Bruce wants to respond to that.
Yeah. Get the mic for
I think the way I'd like to deal with this is talk to you afterwards, because I don't have the immediate details to hand, and I'd be very happy to, to talk to you about it. And maybe it's something that the Neurological Alliance and others might want to take up as well.
Okay, and I should say, obviously, that option is available to everybody who can get their questions answered afterwards, if they don't get a chance now. And I think there was a lady at the back. Yeah, thank you.
Is this switched on? Yes. I'm Faye Gatenby. I'm head of the Essex Care Sensory Service, and through sensory I'm talking about sight and hearing loss. Now, we know with our ageing population, sensory impairment goes with age, and we know that our ageing population is growing. Sensory impairments cause a great burden on health and social care, because people with a visual impairment fall over, they trip and fall, they injure themselves, they are unable to manage their medication, their nutrition. There's a significant impact on mental health in terms of loneliness and isolation. And yet I can't find it mentioned. It doesn't seem to be embedded in strategy. It seems to be missing from a lot of the strategy going forward. I've got a frontline service that I'm really trying to grow, and I'm trying to help prevent costs to health by having social care and integrated services working. And yet if it's not in your strategy, if it doesn't feature in your mental health planning or then I can't help on the front line. So if you want me to be successful on the front line saving you money, I need it put in your plans.
Okay, Amanda, is this something presumably you're seeing as a GP again and again? Is it something that you'd looked at in your STP?
It is absolutely the sorts of issue that STPs are perfectly designed to include in the planning. So some of these very cross-cutting themes that impact on lots of organisations but aren't necessarily the prime focus of each of those organisations. But as you say, poor sensory impairment stops frail elderly people from living independently. It has impacts for social care, it has impacts for general practice, it has impacts for hospitals and A&E departments. And so those sorts of things are very much a focus of the transformed out-of-hospital care and community support that both the statutory organisations but the voluntary sector are bringing to the fore when talking about how we keep our population well as part of our STP planning. So absolutely.
Thank you very much. I think we'll take a couple more questions and then we'll draw the session to a close. Okay, yes, so the lady here.
Sorry, Laura Shatovich again.
You've already asked a question. I'm sorry. I'm going to give it to the gentleman behind you. I couldn't see you were sitting. Sorry about that. But there's other people who need to want to ask a question.
David Reed, I was on PET-CT CRG last year and year before. I suppose it's for Callie, really. The CRGs have been amalgamated, and unfortunately, what's happened is you've got a measuring device being put in with curing devices, and then asked to perform to the same dashboard system. The point system scored for curing someone is obviously going to be better than for finding out what they've got. I just wonder whether the PET-CT, as a peculiar device, it's a bit like comparing a thermometer with an aspirin, really. You can't run the same way of running it. And because of that, the diluting factor of now being one voice in 10 voices, whereas it was one voice on its own before, okay, I think is going to be detrimental.
Okay, we'll get Callie to respond to that.
So are you worried about access to PET, or
Sorry?
Are you worried about access to PET-CT and access to diagnostic techniques and technology?
I was on the commissioning for the AML1 rollout,
right,
which is still rolling, hasn't finished yet.
Okay, well, I'm not sure I've quite got your question correctly, but
it's now put into cancer and bloods all in together, whereas the PET-CT was being used to diagnose dementia and other things as well. And they were looking at ways of doing one scan instead of 3 scans, shortening time, quicker diagnosis, cheaper. And because they're now amalgamated into this great super CRG, I fear for my colleagues, I'm no longer there,
right,
for the people who are trying to speak for the PET-CT, that they will have a much smaller voice and maybe even lost because they're not curative, they're a diagnostic.
No, don't worry. So just an answer of reassurance. I'm working very closely with CRGs on both the diagnostic technology and model and on the treatment technology and model. So everything is important in cancer, as you know, so there's no question that we'll focus inappropriately on one aspect of the cancer journey from diagnosis through treatment compared with another. So the CRGs are working very closely with me. There are 4 really focusing on the cancer piece, and I'm working with all of them, and the person who leads that, all the CRGs, is actually sitting on the Cancer Transformation Board. So I think I'm not worried about... Yeah, we're on it.
Okay.
We're on it.
She's on it. There's a promise. You could follow up with her maybe
Thank
next
you.
year. And I think there's, lady, last question, the lady in the check shirt there in the middle. Thank you very much.
I'm a junior doctor. I thank you, Simon Stevens, for recognising that privatisation is a key concern to most people in the UK. One of the things that I see at my workplace is that when we're admitting patients who've been seen in private care, we don't have access to their notes. We're not able to... You've been talking about linked up care, and one of the new problems you're going to see as the NHS is falling apart and private services are coming in is that services are increasingly disjointed because some are private and some are public. So I just wanted to ask what you're doing to work with CCGs. You've started consulting on conflicts of interest, but what are you doing to ensure that CCGs are able to give equal weight to bids from public providers as bids from private providers? Because I know in many situations public providers haven't been able to put together their bids and offer them because the size of the bids is too great for the public providers to be able to offer.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So I think, first of all, the underlying point you make is absolutely crucial, that however services are provided, we've actually got to make sure that they are regulated, that information flows from the patient's point of view between them. And so the CQC, the Care Quality Regulator, as you know, regulates all providers in the system equally, regardless of who they are. But the sort of second part of your question, I think, around the way CCGs do their procurements, one of the things we've got, one of the opportunities, frankly, I think we may have going into the Brexit negotiation is to try and get more flexibility into the procurement rules that we're required to follow. At the moment, it would be unlawful, actually, for a CCG to discriminate one way or the other in their procurement, and nobody's suggesting that they should start discriminating, but I do think that more flexibility in the way the public contract regulations 2015 operate, which are kind of an EU-wide thing, would be welcome, and maybe that's something that we could achieve post-Brexit.
Well, I want to thank you all very much for a really interesting wide range of questions that I found very stimulating. To this panel, the panel we had earlier, to Simon Stevens for being here throughout, and I'd like to invite Sir Malcolm Grant back up on stage to close the annual general meeting.
Well, thank you, Martha. And in closing the AGM, it falls to me only to express a few votes of thanks, first of all to Martha Carney herself for her very professional moderation of the evening. Martha, thank you very much for that. And secondly, to echo her thanks to the leaders who have sat on these two panels. These are people who are actually leading transformational change across the NHS, and these are not easy billets. And I think their professionalism and their expertise reflects what we see across the whole array of NHS provision. Thirdly, and a very personal vote of thanks on my part, to the non-executive members of the Board of NHS England for their very powerful support and for the expertise they bring from a wide array of different backgrounds to our deliberations. And also to the executive team, and in particular to Simon Stevens, and for his leadership of the organisation and for the very powerful personal relationship that we have developed as a chairman and chief executive. It's this sort of relationship and functioning across the whole system that makes the lives of our staff, I think, more possible, and it makes it possible for us to envisage that even in tightened and difficult circumstances, we can bring about the change that many of us have been talking about for many years, as we've heard tonight. Finally, the vote of thanks is for all of those who have attended this evening, for the professionalism and the eloquence of so many of the questions, and for the challenge that's been put to our teams, and the questions that we shall take away and reflect on further. We're not immediately going to leave the building, by the way. Members of the board will be here and happy to have further mingling with those of you who've attended tonight. Thank you, everybody, and I declare the AGM to be closed. Thank you.